Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite segment of the week. This is Team Degenerate back here talking our favorite lines, gambling from last week, and what it is that we found successful versus what we didn't. I'm your host, Jacob Westendorf, and I'm joined here with Matt Bove. And Matt, we've talked about it each of the last 2 weeks, so I guess we've got to address it. It's time for depression from a baseball standpoint.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, we've experienced a lot of these types of losses with the Packers. Experienced a lot of these losses with the Yankees, unfortunately, in the last, 20 years in the playoffs. Too many times, and that loss ranks right up there with the worst of them.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the last time I felt that bad, and I couldn't come up with anything, and I don't really want to think that hard on it because it just brings back those memories. So we're going to leave that be. Last week we had obviously the Packers won 42-24 against the Raiders on Sunday afternoon, so that was a nice thing. But other than that, from the lines we gave you last week, so the Chicago Bears did not cover against the Saints. They ended up getting their ass kicked by New Orleans. The Giants did not cover, but the Rams did. So 1-2 for the week, Matt. So where are you at now? What are you up unit wise, and what's your record here?
I also, in addition to those two plays, games that I didn't give on here, I bet the Colts which won and the Broncos which lost, both for a unit, so that's a wash anyways. So it was 2-3 overall, loss of 2 units down to 8 units on the year, 29-17 overall record.
20-17 overall record. So we're still not quite 2-1, but pretty close to that. So that's about where you'd want to be. Because what the average that you're looking at is, or your goal mark will be right around 60%.
60% we're doing great. The goal is usually 55, 52 you're breaking even. So 55 is usually the goal. 60, it's a great year if you get 60.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where we're at. We're going to jump in first, actually, with the Packers. They're playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Let's just cut through some of the crap. Patrick Mahomes, there's no way he plays on Sunday night, is there?
I tend to doubt it. I mean, it doesn't make much sense from a Chiefs standpoint when you're looking at this is a game where it's an NFC opponent, so it's not a really big game for the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have a long-term goal of trying to win the Super Bowl. And based on the injury that we saw last week, it's it's hard to make a case that playing Mahomes this week would be the smart thing to do.
Potentially with some backup offensive linemen against the Super Smith brothers, I think you're asking for a lot of trouble in that scenario. I don't want to call it malpractice. I'm not a doctor, but at the same time, putting somebody out there with a dislocated knee against a good pass rushing unit, I think you're asking and setting up Mahomes for, like you mentioned. And it's not, I mean, maybe it'd be a little different if this was a game for, a division crown or a game in the playoffs or even the Super Bowl. But obviously, this is a NFC opponent game. They won last week. The Raiders lost, so they have a little cushion in their division. I would be surprised if Mahomes plays. I don't want to say there's no way. I guess I give it a 0.1% chance. Looking at this from a Packers standpoint, Matt, we've talked about movements and point spreads and stuff like that. So how many points was Patrick Mahomes worth from shifting the spread when they thought Mahomes was going to play versus now Green Bay's a 3.5 point favorite. Started actually at 4.5, I believe, when the line opened.
Yeah, I believe it was 4. So now it got to 4 the other way, so that would be an 8 point adjustment. Now 3.5 would be 7.5 point adjustment, which is typically the league if you compare them to when Aaron Rodgers has been hurt. I think trying to remember back, I think around 8 points was the adjustment for the Packers, and you could see that Mahomes is valuable. Probably just as valuable to the Chiefs as Rodgers was, back, when he was hurt, a few times.
Yeah, so the outlook here, what sucks from a non-gambling perspective is obviously that, you want to see Patrick Mahomes against Aaron Rodgers, even though they're never on the field at the same time. Those are the two best quarterbacks in the NFL for my money's worth. It's going to suck that Green Bay can't play that game with their defense against this offense either, just to kind of see where they're at and how they're going to stack up against. Because realistically, Green Bay's played one really good quarterback this year, and it was Carson Wentz. And the Eagles kind of lit them up. It was a weird game. It was a Thursday night game, so maybe you take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I don't know. But otherwise, Matt Moore, with all due respect, is going to be the worst quarterback that they've played to start this season so far. So I don't know how much you're going to gain for playing against them. But Kansas City is a very good team, at least on the offensive side of the ball. They have a lot of weapons. Defensively, maybe no Frank Clark, maybe no Chris Jones, maybe no Kendall Fuller. I mean, they're running out of defensive players in addition to not having their quarterback. I mean, you'd like to think Green Bay has all the advantage in the world here, but at the same time, you are staying away from this game. So tell me why that is.
Yeah, you just hit on it. I would be on the Chiefs if it wasn't for those injuries on defense to Jones, to Fuller, to Frank Clark, because I think, Andy Reid giving him, he's notorious coming off a bye for his ATS record being outstanding. So he does have some extra time to prepare for this game. And while Matt Moore is the worst quarterback the Packers have played, in terms of backup quarterbacks, I rank him among probably the 10 best backups in the league. He's been a serviceable player when he's been in there, and he'll have his full complementary of weapons with Sammy Watkins as practicing, so he'll be back. Tyreek Hill is back. He still has Kelsey, and Damian Williams was hurt earlier in the year. He's back. So giving him all of his weapons, if the Chiefs, were a healthy team around him, I love betting on good teams playing their backup quarterbacks for a short period of time, because the rest of the team usually tends to step up their game knowing that they have to play harder, play better with the backup in there, and they want to prove to the rest of the league, prove to everybody that they can win. And it's just not their quarterback they could win without him. But unfortunately, from a betting standpoint, the Chiefs just aren't healthy enough on defense, and playing, against Aaron Rodgers the way he's playing right now, I can't, do that. So basically coming into this game, it was Chiefs or nothing for me, because also when you're playing a backup, it's a natural letdown for the opposing team. You see it in the fan base. You're like, oh, we're playing Matt Moore, lock up the win, 8-1 or 7-1. I just don't think that's the case. It's going to be a very difficult game. The Chiefs still have tons of weapons, and they've lost their last 2 home games, so that they're going to be coming out fired up to not lose, 3 in a row at home.
And they're typically very good at Arrowhead Stadium, and that's even true against the Packers. Last time Green Bay was at Arrowhead Stadium, that was the one in 15-1, and I was there. It was not a great day for me that day. Packers side of things here, Darnell Savage returned to practice. It looks like pretty much everyone is back for Green Bay except for Davante Adams. Now, if you want some good news on the Adams front, it's that Matt LaFleur has said that they may take that all the way up to game time to make a decision on him. In the last few weeks, he's been ruled out on Friday. So at least they're extending his timeline a little bit and giving him a chance to play, which they haven't done in the last couple of weeks. So that's a positive development. What are you looking at as far as, because obviously the Green Bay offense against the Chiefs defense is something that is going to be talked about a bunch when this game came out. It was circled obviously as Rodgers against Mahomes. And we've talked about the offense quite a bit just because of the lack of receiving options, although obviously last week it was a big week for the receivers. Now, you and I both believe that one performance shouldn't negate them from trying to improve their wide receiver core, but that's beside the point. Defensively, last week they struggled. Josh Jacobs had a nice day. The Raiders have a very good running game, and they have a good tight end in Darren Waller. Now this week, the Chiefs have a better tight end than Darren Waller. Travis Kelce is probably the best tight end in all of football, especially now that Rob Gronkowski has decided to theoretically call it career, as long as Bill Belichick doesn't try and pull him out of retirement here later in the year. What are you looking at as far as Green Bay's ability here to contain the Chiefs' offense? Because you mentioned Tyreek Hill, but ultimately I do think that they're able to match up with him. Obviously, his deep speed is something you can't prepare for, but I think they're able to make some plays against him. Travis Kelce's the one I think that'll probably be the biggest concern. The Packers, a narrative around their defenses, they can't stop tight ends. Darren Waller's had a big day against them. Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert both had nice days against them. What are you looking at for slowing down this tight end group?
You hope that Savage makes all the difference from that standpoint. Just, whether it was Waller or it was whoever was going over in the middle of the field, it just was a parting of the seas in the middle of the field. And that's where having they haven't had a linebacker who could cover anybody for, as long as any of us could remember. So I think that's where that comes into play, and just I really want to see this defense against these weapons just because of the speed. The speed aspect. The Chiefs doesn't get any faster than the Chiefs, and the Packers. The last few years have had a slower defense that should improve this year with Savage back there. You have Jair, who could hopefully. I'm sure they'll try and shadow him on Tyreek as much as possible. That'll just be a really fun matchup to watch. On the Chiefs' offensive line, Eric Fisher is back at practice, so limited basis, so you figure he'll play. But, hopefully, if you win up front and get some pressure on Moore, he's not a mobile quarterback, so that'll probably be the best way to stop their weapons. But Andy Reid, like I said before, coming off a bye, he's going to have a really good game plan for this game. And that's, that worries me because, last week, we make fun of John Gruden, but he really owned Mike Pettine's lunch in a lot of ways. It wasn't
he did.
Pretty sight. And if he could do it, Andy Reid with extra time to prepare is definitely, more capable of doing that. And if Derek Carr doesn't fumble the ball, the Raiders go up, in that game. Who knows what happens? It's late in the second quarter. Instead, the Packers get the ball back and drive for a touchdown, get the ball back after halftime, another touchdown, game over. What are we talking about if, Martinez did have good hustle on that play, but he didn't really, I wouldn't say he forced the fumble. Carr just lost it. It was a bad decision on his point because, that's a play that's maybe worth it on fourth down or maybe third down, but on first down, when you're going to have the ball at the 1 yard line, if you don't, fumble it there, it's just not a worthwhile play to reach there. Bill Belichick always coaches his players not to do that in any circumstance, so it's just not a smart play by Carr. And, running the ball to Josh Jacobs, all day, I give Blake Martinez a lot of grief, on Twitter for being an overrated player. Just this game was a perfect example of why I do that. He had 16 tackles, looks great in the stat sheet. 10 of them were 4 or more yards down the field. They're just not impact plays.
Yeah, empty calories. The Raiders, it was an interesting game from that standpoint. You mentioned the fumble, which, by the way, that rule is just fine. I know that seems to be an unpopular opinion. Mike Florio bitches about it all the time, but I don't know what else you want the rule to be. So that's fine by me. The goal line stand later in the game, you're talking about a game that could theoretically have been 35-31 with the Raiders giving the ball back to Green Bay. So that's a good point to mention there. Andy Reid, I've often said that I think that Green Bay's goal in this game has to be to survive that initial punch because he's going to have something. It's not like he's going to come in. I strongly believe that Reid is going to have a good plan early, and it's after that where the Packers, when they make their adjustments, have to adjust to what Reid is doing with his backup quarterback. Again, assuming Matt Moore plays here. Let's move on. You've got a game this week that's kind of a process point more than anything else. It's interesting because nobody else can get this line right now. So tell me what you have at Seattle and Atlanta, and tell me what you got here.
Yeah, this game opened at, I think it opened at 3, which was the same as the Rams game opened last week that we won cash easily on, which, makes sense, I guess, because Seattle and the Rams are, probably close to even teams right now, even though I personally believe Seattle is probably the most overrated team in the league. So they're not typically a team I'm looking to bet on right now. But we have a kind of a perfect storm of circumstances here. Matt Ryan injured his ankle towards the end of the game last week. Reports in the locker room were that he couldn't really walk on it. He was in the boot, couldn't put the weight on it. Then Tuesday morning comes and Mohamed Sanu's traded. So now they're starting to sell off pieces. This line starts to get steamed a little bit with the Matt Ryan question. Most of the books take it off the board. FanDuel in New Jersey here did not. Left 5.5 on the with the Seahawks laying 5.5, and I was able to jump on that, figuring that if Matt Ryan doesn't play, the line opened at 3. If I would say, Matt Ryan, he doesn't get the Mahomes 8 points, but Matt Moore is a lot better, stronger backup than Matt Schaub. I don't know, Jacob. How's Matt Schaub still in the league? I had no idea he was still in the league, and that's ridiculous that he could possibly still be a backup quarterback in this league. He's probably got to be one of the 5 worst backups in the league at this point. So if he has to play, getting 5.5 here would be a steal. And even if he doesn't play, Seattle has a good chance of covering that, just because we mentioned we've been betting against them in the last 2 weeks and that they've been easy, or the Arizona game should have been easier than it was. But, I mean, this is just a dead team right now. Somehow Dan Quinn is still surviving. The injury situation only gets worse with obviously Ryan, now Grady Jarrett's not practicing. Desmond Trufant still not going to play. Their defense hasn't had a sack in 4 games. Just now some news gone, so now probably the team's giving up hope. The home game, but the fans there just complete apathy. So now I still don't think the game is posted at most books. Now FanDuel is up to 7, so the fact that we got 5.5 is a huge deal. I mean, doesn't mean it's a lock. There's no locks, but we're way ahead of the game in value laying the 5.5 when we did. I don't think that, it's going to be, I think Seattle should roll like the Rams did, but, there's no guarantees. But, this put 3 units on it, so it's a pretty strong get. And that's why the importance of looking at the games early in the week to find some loopholes like that, or some lines that are going to get steamed up. If Matt Shaw plays, I could see this game closing closer to 8 or 9 points. So to get a 3-point advantage is huge. And also it's the importance of having more than one book that you bet at. If at all possible, I use DraftKings and FanDuel, both apps right on my phone, so I could compare lines. Are always different. So you could get the best line, to have different books where you're shopping around to get the best number. In this case, DraftKings still doesn't have the game up. So the fact that if I just had DraftKings, I wouldn't be able to get this kind of value.
Yeah, and ultimately at the end of the day, that's what you want, is the best value for your bet. We're trying to make money here. This isn't exactly like the wagering of jelly beans, even though that's a joke I like to make pretty often. So check your games early in the week. Check them early and check them often. I think that's something else where you can see some lines get bet to where you can get a better value. Those lines early in the week, like you mentioned, that was helpful for getting us a better number for a game that Matt Schaub might be able to cover that spread by himself. He's the master of the pick 6. So that's something to keep an eye out for there. So that's
also one trend that I found that's interesting. Favorites of 3 or more, after a bye week, they're coming off a loss. They're 76% against the spread. So that's hold on 1 second. Might have just given the wrong one.
So 76% against the spread is a pretty good coverage rate, obviously, for those of you that are mathematicians in this regard. Favorites of 3 or more points. So something to keep looking at when you're looking at your bets. So, Matt, do you have what you need?
Hold on 1 second. Oh, this is what we're looking at. I've read the wrong one. 0, disregard the last one. 0-1 wins as a home underdog of 3 or more points. That's the Falcons right now. They are 9-20, against the spread. So that's 31%. So that would be the Falcons right now. 0-1 wins at home underdog of 3 or more points. And conversely, away teams are actually 36-18, which would be a 66% cover rate, which is kind of what you're seeing. I know the Washington, Minnesota game's going on as we film, and when we started Minnesota, the game was tied. They went up 7 with a touchdown, but you kind of see that Washington was hanging in, which would speak to that trend. Just those teams, like Minnesota is playing a 1-win team like Washington at this point in the year. It's just hard to get up for those games when you're a 17-point favorite.
Certainly. So keep your eye on those things. Check your lines early. Check them often. That's going to do it. That's the only line we've got this week. We're looking at a few more. If he comes up with more, he will post them on his Twitter page, which you can find at MattBovehS. You can follow the show. It's at Packer Pulse. And you follow me. I am at Jacob Westendorf. Team Degenerate. Make your bets, take your wagers, and let's get rich, kids. Packers Chiefs Sunday Night Football, 7:30 at Arrowhead Stadium. Thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Pack Go.